Max Martin is known to our listeners as the voice behind the Made to Move Minute, which ran for a couple of years on our podcast. He's also co-owner of Inform Health and Fitness Solutions in Norwood, Corrective Exercise Australia, and is an immediate past member of the Fitness Australia board. He also loves running, riding bikes, red wine, and gadgets. So tonight we have him on the show to talk about all these things and more and see if Nigel and I can keep up the pace. Max Martin, welcome to the formal part of the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Max, before we talk about the rest of the material, I will just touch on the red wine one more time.
Mm-hmm.
Although at the moment you are hardly drinking much at all, in the past you have talked on this program about enjoying a nice red wine and whatnot.
Yeah.
Do you think the reason you can enjoy it is you feel like you've banked the capacity through your exercise to be resilient against the caloric payload that comes with red wine, or is there something more to it than that?
No, look, I think my enjoyment of wine comes at a couple of different levels. One is the flavor and the experience of sitting around with a bunch of friends and sharing something that's beautiful, that's been made from the land. So that's a very big aspect of it. Interestingly, from a health research perspective, we know that having 1 to 2 alcoholic drinks a day is actually beneficial for our health as well. So there's nothing wrong from that perspective at all. I'm just at the moment, had a very big year last year with a lot of work stuff, and kind of health suffered a little bit, just the amount of exercise and just the snacking and all that sort of thing. So I've just kind of cleaned things right out. And the one thing that wine does do is, so while good from a cardiovascular health perspective,
yes,
is it does stop, the fat burning effect a little bit. It actually kind of gets in front of the queue from a metabolic perspective. And so we've got to burn those calories before anything else. Now, 1 or 2 wines a day, as long as it's, balanced out with everything else that we're doing, not a big issue. Just for me at the moment, over this last couple of months, it's been very, very low amounts.
Yep.
But really enjoying the ones that we've got here today.
Excellent. The thing that got us onto this topic for our conversation tonight is the fact that I think it was November, I lashed out and finally bought myself a smartwatch. And this watch counts my steps, and it puts it front and center on the watch face. And I've become intrigued by the whole world of step counting, which until then was completely foreign to me.
Yeah.
Because I never bought a standalone device for doing that. I didn't even realize my iPhone was counting my steps anyway.
Does it for you, yeah.
I had no idea that was the case, but now I've got this thing. And what I've noticed is I've become a bit hooked. First of all, after the shock of realizing that the first few days I did it and was racking up about 1,800 steps a day, I've since learned that's really bad. I have been almost obsessive about getting it up every week, getting that step count up. Right. And I've set myself an absolute floor of 6,000 steps a day as the minimum, that I don't feel good or clean until I've done at least that. If I crack 10, fantastic.
Yeah.
I've only done that once, to be fair. But I figure, coming from what was probably an average of 1,800 at very sedentary life,
3 times more than that,
to getting generally in the high 4s to now 6 is my new bottom. Is that just dangerous for me to be so obsessive about it? Are there risks in this, or is it generally net good?
Yeah. Look, I think it really depends on the individual and how the individual approaches it. For you, it's obviously started to change behavior. Mm-hmm. And it's a tool that actually harnesses that behavior in a sense. It gives you that feedback very immediately. You can tell halfway through the day whether you're tracking along or not. And then how do you modify the rest of the day? So, I'm sure we'll expand on this a lot more, but I think that's one of the really, really good things about these tools. It's that awareness. Kind of like you found out, oh my goodness, I'm only doing 1,800 steps. Probably if I asked you, I don't know what answer would have come before that.
Nor do
idea.
No.
He said high, he said low. So the first thing is now which then drives change, and you've started to put that change in place. Certainly, there can be a level of, I'll use the word addiction. It's probably a little bit of a strong word, but that, being very, very focused on achieving the outcome. But I think if it's sustainable and it's not then, spilling over into every other area of your life, then I think there's definitely a net gain there, a net positive.
Would you say there is an ideal number of steps per day that we should be aiming for? You know how Life Being and those things talked about, you got to find 30 minutes a day.
Mm-hmm.
Is there such a thing as a magic number of steps, or is it more nuanced than that?
Look, the marker that's typically given to people is 10,000 steps.
Oh, really?
So that's where the recommendation comes in, that ideally we're getting 10,000 steps in the day.
Right.
Which is a big ask, right?
Yeah.
But I think that is couched together with a number of other things that you're doing. So you may not necessarily get the steps, but you're doing training in the gym, which is, you're doing resistance training. It's higher intensity. So that sort of time will count more than more casual steps, for example.
Right.
So the intensity of exercise, is really important.
Yeah, I was just going to point out there, got a watch as well and use Endomondo for doing my running stuff. What I've noticed is I can go for an 8K run, which is a normal sort of 12 kilometre an hour pace, and not actually achieve my daily step maximum, because obviously when you're running, the steps are more like a pace.
Correct.
And they're not as many, and it accurately counts the number of steps, totally ignoring that, the amount of effort.
Correct. The fitness benefit that you get
is much, much higher when you're running than walking. So, yeah, I think even though it might give indications, I think, as best, it's good for tracking the non-exercisey exercise that you do, just the walking around steps, as opposed to when you have a specific session or a particular run or a bike ride or something.
Has Nigel picked up on something there? Is there such a thing as junk steps and health steps? Like, are some steps worth more than others?
It depends on what the outcome is. I think broadly, no. One of the big things that we always try to talk to our clients is try to move more, because by and large, obviously, we don't move enough. So junk steps are good steps. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up, for example, is one of the things that we know is that sedentary behavior is now worse than being inactive, right? So being inactive is categorized as you don't reach the amounts of activity that you need on a daily basis. So half an hour, it's now increasing close to an hour a day because of the way that the health of the population is going. But for example, you could do your half an hour of exercise a day, and if you sit for 10 hours of the day, then you're basically wiping the benefits, the health benefits of that half an hour of exercise. So you're back at square one. And so one of the key things that we're trying to do is, one of the Made to Move minutes, for example, that I discussed was sitting is the new smoking.
Yes.
And we know that from a health perspective, that's very much true. Sitting for half an hour without actually getting up is the equivalent of having one cigarette. And so that junk step could very much be getting up from your desk, walking over to grab a glass of water and come back. And if you've broken up that sitting time, then that's really valuable.
Yeah, the other option you got there is depends on how your office is set up. But if you've got, say, 2 computers in an office, you have one as a standing, one as a sitting. And that way, like the way I work, I have my desktop computer, but to go on the internet, I need to use a separate network, which I can access via a laptop, which I can then put on a pile of boxes and a stand-up desk. So I can sort of split the day 50-50 between standing up for half of it and sitting down.
I do want to throw some research into the ring. This is a question without notice for you, Max Martin.
Bring it on.
I listen often to the Harvard Business Review IdeaCast, and they had an academic being interviewed and talking about office behavior and health and whatnot. And they said they often don't recommend the stand-up desk. So it's different to what you're saying. You've got a hybrid setup, Nigel.
Yeah.
Because it's documented that there's at least a 6-month adjustment period in which your productivity goes down because your physical body is multitasking. You're trying, you have more typos, you miss things, because we're not used to having this lot of motor skills going while the other ones are going.
I think that depends on your initial level of fitness.
Look, I think so. I totally agree. I haven't read that paper, but it would make a lot of sense to me. And I'll draw a parallel, for example, with fitness balls, the big Swiss balls. And they've been around for a while. And we still do. We tell people to, ideally, if they can sit on one of those at the desk, it's better than sitting on a chair. But And the reason for that is it helps activate more muscles because you've got a balance on the ball. You know, you can fall asleep on an executive chair. You can't fall asleep on a ball. It doesn't mean you've got better posture, but you're being more active, right?
Okay.
People often say, I've got a ball because it helps with my posture. You can really slouch on a ball anyway, but you're balancing. However, we tell people to start 15 minutes at a time, progress it to 20 minutes at a time, half an hour at a time in an office setting, ideally share a ball between 2 or 3 people. So that, because you're using muscles that are not used to working that way for that long. You know, it would be like saying, you know, okay, Steve, we're going to go and run a marathon before we've learned how to run 5 kilometers. And so it would be a similar concept with the stand-up desk. Standing up for a long period of time, you're using a lot more muscle mass. And so it goes back to Nigel's point. If you don't have the fitness to do that, you're going to feel that.
So, as you help corporations, you could have a slogan of share your balls around. So, like an office floor could have just a few balls and get everyone sharing them as the first step.
And then get up.
And then get up.
Then you get your own balls later.
Yeah, you get your own. You graduate.
You graduate.
On this note, because what you're saying to me, Max, is that the research you're looking at is saying more increasing the incidental fitness throughout the day is much better for us than just having one burst and doing nothing. Surely one burst is still good, provided there wasn't the nothing that followed. So one burst plus incidental would be
perfect.
And I've seen this ad on TV a few times. Last week, I don't watch a lot of TV, but we were away on holiday. My wife was watching the tennis, and there were these ads, and I forget which company. It's one of the vitamin pill companies, and they have these vignettes of people doing their daily work and then looking at some sports clothes, and they slip on their wetsuit or they grab their squash racket, and it's all about you can make choices. There's a guy in an executive in an office, and he opens his drawer and he pulls out his jogging shoes, and you see him going down the passageway, going out for a run, and a receptionist comes up to ask him something, and he holds his hand up because no, he's doing this as my time. And it's all about being a better me or whatever. And their message is basically take vitamins, despite the fact that up until that, I think they were on the right track of making those choices for incidental things. I
think the saying there is if you take your vitamins, then you will become that physically active person.
Right.
That'll come along with the taking of vitamins.
But that's not the case, is it?
No, that's right. No, of course not.
Are you telling us that advertising isn't true?
I'm saying that they had the makings of a fantastic message.
Exactly. And then, they drew 2 parallels, didn't they? It's like a good-looking girl drinking Coke.
Yes. Like, how do you often prescribe vitamins to your clients?
Look, prescribe is probably a strong word from our perspective. But, I mean, I take, for example, magnesium, fish oils. I think vitamin D is incredibly important, and most people tend to be not have sufficient levels of vitamin D.
How would you know you don't have enough vitamin D? What do we see?
Blood tests typically would be the way to go. Oh, look, it can be moodiness, low energy.
No, I asked what.
So things like that would typically, point to either vitamin D, iron. But that would be something that then would send them off to GP to get some blood tests and see what the levels are. But yeah, look, I think vitamins can be part of that bigger health picture that someone has. But unless you're getting the big things right, which is the movement, as you're saying with that ad, much better to get out and do that jog.
Yeah. So back to gadgets, which brought us here tonight. Okay. What gadgets help? And what gadgets can hinder? For example, can we have too many? We spoke to Patrick Baker on the way here, the guy I work with at Baker Marketing, and when he knew you were coming on, he said he wants to know, does he get a Fitbit, a heart monitor, what is going to help a rather or slightly overweight 50-year-old, mid-50-year-old executive try and claw something back?
Yeah. Look, I think there's probably a number of answers there. It depends on what he wants to do.
Yeah.
Look, I think the Fitbits, the step counters are one of the best ways to start. Probably because it's where you get the most accurate information.
Oh.
In that, a lot of the other data that we get from these trackers is based on formulas of basic information, right? So, for example, your Fitbit or whatever the brand is on your wrist, that's counting up and down movements. And it's counting those up and down movements and converting each of those up and down movements into a step, right?
So actually, we had a listener question from Bruce Andrew Gannon who actually asked how these things work. So let's just look at this. So I've often wondered,
how does it know?
Yeah, because it's a little thing on my wrist.
Well, it depends on the technology it's actually using for recording as well, because there's a couple of different flavors there as well.
Right. So what are you saying? Up and down movement. So my hand, my watch, if I just sat and moved it up and down, would that be?
Think that you're taking steps.
Yep.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Works with Pokemon Go.
So I shouldn't say sit at my desk with my hand going up and down.
No, that's right.
Because it will inflate things.
Correct. Yeah. And get you into all sorts of trouble.
Wow. Wow, really?
So maybe you're not doing 10,000 steps every Thursday afternoon.
Yeah. No. They're not steps.
Right. But
so basically there's a little, a sensor inside these phones and so on that sends changes in direction.
Yeah, it's an accelerometer that works out. Because the other way of doing it is the older school using a GPS. So like the Garmin's years ago were one of the first companies to come out with the ones where you had a watch but with a GPS in, and these were the old huge watches.
So it would estimate how many steps given you move 50 yards.
You didn't worry about steps.
It wouldn't give you steps. It'll give you distance.
It'll give you absolute distance, and similarly average speed, and similarly with the heart rate. The original ones were like Polar was a brand that was very common 10 years ago.
Yep.
They would actually have a chest strap that would basically be across your heart and would actually measure exactly what your heart rate is, as opposed to the new ones that try and use it via the wrist. And if you remember right, when Apple first went to bring out their watch, there was a big delay in that for about a year, where their biometric sensors ended up being a lot more trickier than they initially allowed for on that. Right. So it's trickier to do it. And so, like, as Max is saying, it's a bit of a horses for courses, but having some sort of feedback is good, because some people like getting numbers and some don't. And I think if you find you're one of the people who likes numbers and likes using the online apps for tracking your exercise, there's all sorts of bits of software we can talk about. Then you can start off with something that measures steps. And then if you want to actually measure heart rate accurately because you've got a certain training regime or distance you want to get it, then you can always just get those as well, because it all sort of works together these days.
Correct. Yeah. So look, spot on the back of what Nigel is saying. So I think there's probably two base measures that are accurate that these things measure.
Yep.
Steps and heart rate if you've got that heart rate strap.
Okay.
Yeah. And so how they can help you change your behavior is by either trying to increase steps or spend longer periods of time at higher heart rates.
Oh, okay.
Both things can happen by moving your hand up and down a lot.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So ideally you're doing it by being more active. We might have to go back and edit.
We might just have to go back to where Steve's putting his watch, because I can't see it on his arm at the moment.
It's on. No, it's there. And then today's a very bad day because I've had an all-day planning session at work.
Right.
I had the loss of my wife first thing this morning, so I couldn't abandon the kids and head out for a walk. And so I'm only at 3,500 steps.
We can talk on the treadmill.
Well, we can. We might do that for the video.
Yeah. Sounds good. There you go. Yep. There you go. So at the end of the day, what does Patrick use? Look, I think the watch like you wear that counts steps is a lot easier than having to put on a heart rate in the morning. You put your shirt on, you forget, you're taking your shirt off at work to put on the heart rate monitor. Not as handy. That would be something that I'd recommend for someone that's looking more at training effects from an exercise or a sporting perspective. Then what these things do is they measure your number of steps. You've put into the watch how much you weigh, how tall you are, and it says an individual that's this size would typically travel this far with this number of steps. So then they extrapolate that information to give you distance if they don't have GPS, right? And then from there they say someone that walks this distance, that weighs this much, would burn this many calories. But they're all based on averages, right? So the further away, I heard it said on a podcast on this topic actually, that there's kind of this, almost if you think about these concentric rings of an onion. And the inner rings are the more accurate, the more directly measured, be it heart rate or number of steps. And then you start to make extrapolations from those. I think one of the key things at the end is whatever the data it is that it's measuring is a change in behavior, So is it actually going to help you change behavior? Which, for example, for you, Steve, the watch has done that beautifully.
Yes. And I think it's baking it in too. Because once I've tasted this knowledge, it's really hard to shut it out.
Right.
It's really hard
to go back.
to ignore it.
Yeah. Great.
Like you feel dirty. Like
Right.
not having got the numbers.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were things like, for example, on Christmas Day, I did play cricket in 40-degree heat with my two nephews who are in their early 20s and who could not outlast me. Like 90 minutes into that, and they wilted and they went inside because they're soft. And I mean that as a loving uncle.
Yeah.
That wouldn't see my watch would have just counted my steps, but surely my body was under a bit more pressure and
Correct.
enjoying that a lot more.
Depending how many times you swung and you missed the ball, maybe they would have counted as
Yes.
steps as well.
So we talked about, like, so watches and Fitbits, they count, the heart monitors count. What other fitness technology do you hear about in your world that people are using on a daily basis?
Look, probably the other biggest one is some sort of sleep monitoring.
Yeah.
And this your phone will do as well. Probably the watch that you're wearing may do it as well.
Yep.
In that, typically because a smartphone has those accelerometers in it as well, they sense movement and they can be set to sense very subtle movements. So you put the phone on the mattress next to you and, once you stop moving, the phone thinks that you're sleeping. And so it can actually count. You can tell it when you went to bed. It'll work out when you fell asleep. It'll work out your movements during the night. So it can have a look at quality of sleep and restlessness, for example. And then when you wake up, so you can start to track number of hours of sleep, quality of sleep as well. So that would be one of the other big popular uses that we tend to see.
So, and your watch will do it like there's my watch, and there's my last week's sleep on there with the amount of sleep, which is currently averaging 5 hours, 47 minutes, which is pretty typical for how much I sleep.
Yeah, well.
In 5.5 to 6 hours. And, a lot of the phones will have that in. So if you're a person who can sleep with a phone on your wrist, and I imagine there's probably some people can't. I didn't used to.
Mm-hmm.
I used to avoid watches for ages. Then it'll track as you move and tumble and turn in your night. And some of them will also give like the light sleep versus the deep sleep as well.
Correct.
So this actually comes back with, so deep sleep last night I had 2 hours, 26 minutes of deep sleep out of 5 hours, 52 total sleep.
Now, how accurate would that be, Max?
Yeah, and that's the question at the moment, because what it's sensing, and so basically some of the studies that I've seen on these is you can set, and I'm not exactly sure with the common smartphones, but what the research is looking is that you can set the sensitivity of the sensors.
Oh.
So a normal phone will tend to underestimate sleep time, because as soon as you're quiet, it thinks that you're asleep. I mean, you could be reading a book and flicking the pages subtly, or reading on your, on your phone or iPad, or and it'll probably think that you're asleep because you're not moving a lot.
Yep.
As soon as those sensors are turned up, then it tends to overestimate the amount of sleep. But look, I think again, at the end of the day, are we that fast about half an hour? Probably not so much. We would be fast between 5 hours and 7 hours, and again, the important thing that I'll probably keep coming back to is, does it help to change behaviors? The data in itself is interesting, and for the nerd is really interesting, but at the end of the day, are we changing your behaviors? Are you sleeping a little bit more if you don't sleep enough?
And long-term trends as well. That's the good thing about it, especially if it goes off to another app that's running, so you actually can see over a period of a month if your trend is, because you can see if you start drifting down on how much sleep you're getting. Because that's the sort of thing you won't notice normally, that you're staying up later or getting less sleep. But if you actually have an app that tracks it and then backs it up onto one of the fitness apps and things, or even just Google Wear or whatever, you can actually see if suddenly you're letting
a pattern one way or the other.
Yeah, it's drifting down or drifting up. Yeah.
It makes me want to get back. There was an app that was developed a number of years ago by a psychologist in England, and it was called Dream something. I have to look it up, and if I find it, I will put it in the show notes, because it was using your phone to measure all those things. But what it would do is it knew that if you woke up, if the alarm went off when you were just in a deep sleep, you're about to have a horrible day.
Right. Yeah.
So it would say to you, what's the latest time you need to get up by?
Yeah.
And then how early can we wake you? And then if it finds that you're just starting to disappear again and you're going to be in deep sleep at alarm time, it will wake you up to 5, 10, 30 minutes earlier, to avoid you
going back into a deep
being
sleep.
awoke. So it sounds to me like there's some value perhaps in playing with that again.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is there like a great combination of health apps, fitness apps that would give us the data we need? Or is it just, you can be just so focused on the apps that you forget about the purpose?
Look, I think both. Again, I'll probably sound like a little bit of a broken record, but what behaviors are we looking to change? So, for example, if I, tell you the apps that I'm using at the moment.
Yes.
So, I use personally MyFitnessPal, which I use for dietary entry. Because at the moment, I'm actually mucking around with the foods that I eat and the balance of the nutrients that I'm getting, preparing for a really big bike event. So I'll be riding end of April from Melbourne to Adelaide along the Great Ocean Road over 7 days.
I can lend you the airfare.
That's right. It's not for lack of money.
Right.
You can lend me pass the money on, put it in for a donation. It's for a good cause. It's for the Leukemia Foundation.
Oh, okay.
So I'm trying to adapt to burn more fat. And so that means changing the foods that I'm eating, especially around my training. So I'm quite interested in measuring what I'm actually eating. And because like you said before, if I think through my day, we may have an idea of, I reckon I've eaten these sort of proportions of foods. But until I look at the numbers, I go, I could have probably tweaked things a little bit better. But personally, I get a little bit bored of using tools like that for very long. So I'll do it for 3 or 4 days, set the pattern, and then stick to the pattern. And then if I feel like the pattern is changing, I'll go back and I'll reassess and see where I'm at. Yeah. So that's a big one. And then the other one, I don't count steps personally for myself because I'm standing up for most of the day doing the work that I do. But I will use a GPS watch to track my runs, and my rides. And then I hook that up onto Strava. Strava is, it's an app itself, which is, great for running and cycling. It fosters competition, and I think this is one of the things I will get onto afterwards. So what keeps you motivated to using these tools to change your behavior? And, whatever is going to keep you motivated is great. And one of the things that Strava does is it just brings very real competition between people you don't know. How fast do you ride certain parts of, the city or segments of road or segments of trail? And there is, a king of the mountain and a queen of the mountain. And,
oh, really?
Right. And,
it's like the old Foursquare, which used to be a social app.
Exactly.
Where the person who checked in the most was the mayor of a business.
Correct.
And here we are, you're the king. Are you the king of anywhere or the queen anywhere at the moment?
My street.
Of your street?
On running, I've got much better placings than on cycling. So I'm much more competitive running than I am cycling.
They're also very good for long-term tracking, like over the years. It's really like, I was just looking at my Endomondo here and I go back to May 2010. And before then I was actually using a folder where I was writing manually all my runs into it and everything. And so over the years you can actually see, wait a sec, I was running at a certain speed, back in 2011 or something. How much was I, and I can't remember back then, but you can go look up this thing.
Correct.
I automatically remember that, I was actually doing, 19 sporting tasks a month. And, X percentage was running and so much was orienteering and stuff like that. So it's actually handy for going, wait a sec, how much was I doing when I was managing to achieve a certain level of fitness?
Okay.
So it sort of gives you a way of grounding what you need to do.
Yeah. So that competition against others through Strava is going to be a motivation for some.
Correct.
Whereas I feel like I could play against myself for quite a while on this walking thing, and I've got enough virgin territory to sort of conquer before I need to expose myself to the world.
Others. Yeah. So, I'm not sure whether Strava you can keep private, but there's others, for example, like Runkeeper. Runkeeper is a really good one that we recommend a lot to our clients. It's what I used to use before Strava, where it's a lot more personal, but you can set tracks, for example. So you say, this is my around the block walk.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And so you draw it on the map, you've done it, and you go from beginning to end. That's my around the block walk. And then every time you do the same walk, because it's on GPS, it'll know, and it'll say, you've done this walk 10 times. Today was the second fastest.
So you don't have to physically do anything. You just go for the walk.
No. Exactly.
And it will go, oh, hang on, this is marrying up with something.
Correct.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So all these GPS ones, and that's what Strava does. So for example, it recognizes different segments, and you can create a segment. That's the term that they have.
Sure.
So let's say Kensington Road at the frontier of Inform.
Yep.
So from the roundabout to Portrush Road.
Yep.
So I can call that Max's segment, right? So what I'll do is I'll put it in, but thousands of other people have ridden that bit of road in the past. So what it'll start to do, it'll start to populate their records, and all of a sudden it'll say 10,000 people have ridden this segment, and you are the 500th fastest one. So all of a sudden I go, well, hold on a second, that's my segment. I want to be quicker. And every time I ride it, I don't need to tell it that I'm riding that segment. It just picks it up via GPS and says, okay, now you've ridden it again, and now you're the 400th fastest.
Wow. Could you spend the day in your car just driving up and down?
Yeah, those are called Strava cheats. You can report those. So if you see speeds that are not doable,
you could drive
you could drive at 25k an hour instead of 22k an hour, and but
not that I would do that.
That kind of defeats the purpose a little bit, but you could. So look, that would be probably Runkeeper is a really good one. MyFitnessPal from a nutritional perspective, again, just awareness for clients. But then where just this whole thing of attaching or wearing apps we've just purchased, so we haven't actually played with them a lot. It's these two little foot pods, which have been around in the running circles for a while. Polar, that Nigel mentioned earlier, have a thing you attach to your shoe that tells you how many strides you're doing, so how many footsteps you're taking in a run, for example, which your watch would do as well. But it'll tell you how long is your foot spending on the ground, for example. So we can have a look at ground contact times, ground reaction times.
Oh, wow.
It's got these tilt meters that will tell you how much you're pronating, for example, or supinating, so how much your foot is rolling in or out. And if you wear two, you can compare right versus left. So the amount of data that we can get from people, if someone has right knee pain when they're running, we can put these little pods, send them off for a run and have a look at whether the 2 feet behave differently.
That is phenomenal. That's almost at the level of robotics.
It's amazing. It is amazing. Oh, look, and then we can get onto virtual reality goggles at the moment, and that's a whole crazy other
They're not
world.
really here yet for fitness, are they?
Well, they are. Actually, I saw this, a clip, I think it was a Kickstart campaign. So using the Samsung VR goggles, I think it's them that have it, where you put, if you're not familiar with it, you put this basically mask that looks like diving goggles, but you can't see through it, and you're seeing a film being played in front of you, and because it's right in front of your eyes, you feel like you're looking at the real world.
Yep.
And there's a machine that you attach yourself, basically you lie on it. Remember the machines that we had in the 80s that you would flip yourself upside down to kind of extend the spine? So it looked like almost like a bed.
I don't know what your past was like, Max, but I've
not yours. Really? You've missed out, Steve.
Sounds like whips are involved.
Right.
But no.
Well, yes. Okay. So let's go there. So you basically lay yourself down on this contraption that supports your trunk. You attach your hands
with a strap on. There's a strap. Yep.
Yeah. You attach your hands onto these two separate handles, and you put your legs on these two extensions.
Yeah.
You're wearing the goggles, and you can fly. Right? Now, basically, let's go back to the Wii platform. Right? So we had our handles, and we used to point it at the TV and do things. Then you can stand on the platform, and you can lean from side to side, and you can skateboard or snow ski by leaning from side to side. So it's very similar concept, but now you're lying down. So from a core activation perspective, from a balance development, it's just taking things to that next level.
And can I just say for the record, I think if you go back to episode 173, Phil and Ryan from Little Bang Brewery used to be video game developers for the Wii.
Wow.
So if you're interested in the whole Wii thing, have a listen to that one.
Beautiful.
So you actually are flying. And I suppose the game makes you start coming back to Earth unless you're flapping.
Right. Or, go through these circles, or you've got to get to that mountain over there.
I think I've seen a preview of it. You do need to basically move your arms up and down, and that moves you vertically, gives you speed. And then you steer and fly as if you're actually flying, and the view is if you're flying as well.
But when I first got our Wii, and I played some games with it. I had the worst arm
Right.
forever
Yeah.
because, I was trying cricket or baseball or something. And because you're doing these little jerky movements, repetitive ones, and your arm's not used to it.
Exactly.
So how do we use things like a Wii, for example, while we're
Yeah.
talking about this, safely? Should I have just started with smaller bits and built up my virtual baseball capability?
Look, I think that's the case for all physical activities, and it goes back to what we said about the stand-up desks, the fit balls. It's that progression. The body's not fit or not fit to that specific activity, not used to that specific activity. So build-up is always good. And I think that's one of the things that comes down to this whole conversation. Does it change behaviors? Typically, the more motivated people with all these tools will do better because they're already motivated. This is just a tool that helps to feed, the behaviors that they want to achieve. But for the less motivated, one of the key things, and the research is really strong in this, is having a coach by your side to help you plan how to get the most out of these tools is key. So even ideally for something like that Wii or that virtual reality goggle, having someone that can kind of go, okay, this is where we're going to start and where we're going to get to. Because I can well see people flying for 4 or 5 hours, one afternoon and not being able to get out of bed the next day.
I think, though, you said that people who are motivated will get a lot out of these tools. I'm finding that this step counter is helping to breathe new motivation in me from, very scant resources, to the point that it ends up having me ask Ash here at Inform, who's my trainer, better questions. It's actually helping to inform me as a person who needs to get fitter and healthier because I now have data and I've got context and I understand how bad I've been, not just from guilt, but actually seeing some data. So absolutely. I actually think even for the unmotivated, there's a chance that this could prime the pump. And if there was ever going to be a spark of motivation, this might be it. Look,
totally agree. I think one of our big roles is not necessarily to introduce the technology to people, but to help them get the most out of the technology they already have. Explain it to them, guide them. Look, and I think sometimes even getting the shiny new toy is a big part of the motivation. We buy a nice looking watch that does this stuff. Well, let's start to use it, and that starts things.
Now, can we measure too much? Can you get lost in your nerdism?
Yeah. Look, I think this is like looking at too many YouTube clips or just scrolling through Facebook mindlessly. I read an interesting article on Strava, and the title of it was Why Strava is Destroying Your Family. And I can very much see, because you can compare yourself against, if you're part of a club, you can compare yourself against people in that club. If you follow other people, so you've got that kind of, you build communities, then I can see whether I can climb up Green Hill Road quicker than most of the people that I follow. But then I start to look at the people that they follow, and, and you can definitely, after getting back from an hour ride, spend an hour looking at the data. So I think the risk is certainly there.
We have a little handful of some questions that have come in from listeners that I thought I'd like to use to round out the formal part of our interview. Because as you know, the interview continues throughout the whole show.
Great. I'm here.
Yes. All right. The first one is, this person just used their initials, DT, said, I'm taking on a new job later in January. It'll be quite a public role. I carry some extra weight around my girth and under my chin. What can I do in a few weeks to make my body great?
Wow. Let's define make your body great. Firstly, what does that mean? But weight loss is primarily dietary, not exercise, right? So it'll be addressing food intake primarily, especially short term. If we're looking at early January, so making change over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, diet will be the way to do it. I think as a fitness industry, we've lied to the community a little bit about jump on a treadmill and you're going to lose weight. Exercise is not great at helping you lose weight. Exercise is great for so many reasons, so many, health associated reasons, but it's very good at stopping you from putting weight back on. There's no question that as you exercise, you will lose some weight, but diet will be the key.
Okay.
So for someone like that, maybe MyFitnessPal would be a better option. Punching everything that hits.
Yep.
It helps you set some goals. So it says, how heavy are you? How much weight do you want to lose? Over how long?
Yep.
Okay, so this is how much you should be eating,
All
for
right.
example.
Yep. Good answer. Erica Diamond has asked this question, who said she was looking forward to listening to this episode, by the way. I find it really hard to know whether to keep on my fitness routine when my ankle is sore or my knee is giving me trouble. If I stop, I lose fitness, but if I keep going, I risk further injury. How can I work through this?
Wow, that's such a big conundrum, isn't it? And one that we face every day. Absolutely. Look, I think the common sense answer is someone helping you to deal with the ankle and the knee and why they're getting sore. So I think that would be really important. One of the things that we don't want to do is do more and make that worse, because the body will adapt and it will compensate and it will protect itself. So we start to get all these add-on aches and pains, and because we start to move differently when we're in pain. So that's another big conversation for another day.
Yeah.
So we definitely don't want to make those things worse, but at the same time, you don't want to decondition.
Yes.
Because a body that's deconditioned is much less able, a lot less robust to be able to deal with aches and pains, and strength is one of the really big things to protect a joint. But it sounds like maybe movement's not great, things are not in great alignment, and that's why they're hurting. So the basic, cheap advice, almost if I can say that, is do things that don't hurt it. Perhaps cycling is better than running, for example. Swimming for a while, but definitely see someone that can help with that knee and ankle pain.
Yep. And now you're much too modest to say anything, but if Erica lived near Norwood, popping in to see you guys wouldn't hurt.
It would. Look, that's
an
what
assessment.
We do. That's what we do every day. We help people get out of pain.
Because you've got an app that you developed for the rest of the industry.
Movement screen.
Movement screen. So help isolate what was causing a lot of those issues.
Correct.
So that it can start being corrected.
Correct.
Okay.
So our big thing is, assess movement, fix the things that are not working really well, and then progress training.
Last question for the interview from Anna Votino. And she asked, I probably should have done this one earlier, but it's a great question. Fitbits, Garmin, Apple Watches, etc., are all radio emitting devices. Therefore, how healthy are they long term? You just have to wonder, especially if you're wearing them all day and at night as well, to check your sleeping patterns. I guess by wearing them, it gives you more motivation to get healthy, therefore keeping illnesses at bay. Just a thought, but I'm sure sometime in the future there will be debate on it if further evidence, if there is any, comes to light.
Look, that's probably not my huge area of expertise. Other than that, I know that the evidence doesn't support the risk of the radio transmitting capacities of these devices. But Nigel, I don't know if you've got something to add there.
So if we want to talk about glasses for the next 5 minutes.
Well, I think this is worthwhile, and it's a great question.
Yeah.
We'll do a bit of science. I actually spent a bit of time thinking about this because this topic has been in the media for 20 plus years now, since Wi-Fi first started coming out. And you'll routinely see these stories. These days you'd call them clickbait. But you have these scare stories about different sorts of devices that put out RF. So by RF, it's radio frequency. So that's something that transmits energy in the electromagnetic spectrum. So we'll just do a bit of a step back here about what that means in words. So people would be familiar to when you listen to, say, the FM or the AM radio. So that runs at a certain frequency, which is generally like a medium frequency. And with every particular frequency that you transmit at, there's a certain energy level associated. So this isn't the power that the device is putting out. This is the energy, which represents basically how much that RF can interfere with other things around it. And basically, as you go higher in frequency, the electromagnetic radiation has more energy and more potential for actually doing harm. So we'll start off with so if you think about this as, say, if someone lightly throws a ping pong ball at you, it'll just sort of bounce off and not do any harm because it has a low energy level. If someone full pelt, say, bowls a cricket ball at your head and hits you at 100 plus kilometers an hour, that's going to hurt and cause damage. So exactly the same thing works basically with electromagnetic radiation. The higher the frequency of the radiation, the more particular energy is in the field that is interacting with whatever it hits.
Okay.
So this comes about, and she was specifically asking about these devices. So they typically either use Wi-Fi or Bluetooth are the two most common transmitters. They actually translate to particular frequencies and protocols that are used for transmitting data, and to some degree the amount of power they use. Bluetooth used to be quite high power, now it's very low power. But it's not the power that causes the potential damage, it's the frequency it operates on. So people will be familiar with the word Wi-Fi that you have around your house, in your office. That's at a frequency of about 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz if you've got the high-speed one. And that translates to about 10 micro electron volts of energy, and that's the term we use for measuring the amount of energy in the field that's interacting with you.
Per second.
No, it's just it's a measure of energy.
How much
it's
energy?
a measure of energy or the potential for causing harm.
Okay.
So at the Wi-Fi frequency, that's pretty much like a very, very light ping pong ball slowly rolling into your body.
Okay. So it's firstly it's light, and it's also just basically.
Yeah, the frequency is low. The frequency is only 2.4 gigahertz. Now, to cause damage to your body via electromagnetic radiation, one of the classic ones here, and George will be able to talk about this as well.
George.
Sorry,
Max.
not George, Max.
Have you ever been called George before?
I've never been called George.
Who's George? Where'd George come from?
I don't know.
This is George the Ghost.
This is not
That's a
doing
separate
your
story.
argument very good
No.
evidence.
So everyone knows that if you stay out in the sunlight and the UV damage will cause you potentially cancer.
Yep.
And the reason it can do that is because there's the UV at the high end of the spectrum, and then there's also the extra high frequency you can't see, which is actually the really worst UV. And it does that because it can actually cause ionization within cells. And what that means is it can knock off an electron, which can then form a free radical. So you'll have a positive charge and a negative cell, and that'll interact with different parts of your body and actually damage it, and can damage your DNA in your body.
And how does that compare to Wi-Fi?
Okay, so the energy level needed to break it starts off, this gets a bit chemical here. There's things called double bonds, which is a type of bond energy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You need roughly three electron volts to break the bond and to create free radicals.
Right.
The general threshold of ionization is at 10 electron volts. So think of those numbers, 3 electron volts, 10 electron volts. Down in the microwave frequency, we are at 10 to 100 micro electron volts. So it's 5 orders of magnitude less energy
Than you
need to actually physically be able to cause any sort of chemical damage to a body. And this is one of those things where the unlikelihood of it decreases. Mm-hmm. This is an absolute physical law where to actually break a bond, you actually do need a certain level of energy or it just won't break. It's like, say you have a rubber band. If you just stretch it back and forth a centimeter, it's just not going to break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't matter how many times you do it, it just isn't going to break. If you decide to stretch it a meter, then it'll break.
Mm-hmm.
And so the analogy here is the very low energy level simply cannot, under any known law of physics, and we've tested this for over 50 years now, it simply can't cause cell damage. So getting back to the original thing, the question about these devices that use Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or even anything else that comes out in soon will always be down in that sort of gigahertz range now. They might bring out something new in 10 years' time that maybe works at 100 gigahertz because it's faster to communicate and your phone and that will update quicker. However, that is still many, many, many order of magnitudes below any level of energy needed to cause damage.
So the good news for Anna and all of us is that it's not worth losing a moment's sleep about.
Not 1 second.
Not even 1 second.
No, you physically cannot get harmed by microwave frequency radiation. Now,
is that the same for your mobile phone?
It's the same for your mobile phone because things like radios and mobile phones are up in the gigahertz as well. Like we've lived all of our lives under AM and FM radio for all of our lives. Those transmitters are typically 10 kilowatts or 50 kilowatts of power. And all around us, anywhere around the planet, you can turn on a receiver and hear that radiation being beamed out. No long-term effects at all. Because even though it's high power, the actual energy of the frequency it's transmitting at is so low, it's like being hit by little ping pong balls all your life. So basically, in summary, anything to do with the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or electronic devices the best you can do is get a slight warming, and you need quite a lot of power, and the warming from that might be 0.1 of the Celsius. As soon as you get up from your desk and go walk to a tap, your body will get warmer naturally because it's generated energy in making you move. That vastly outstrips even the warmth you get from any of these devices.
How do you take this information, Max? Is that fascinating from your perspective?
Yeah,
do you ever get clients asking this question?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've had that question, and that's why I've looked at the evidence, and I couldn't explain it to that degree of detail. But I'd never found any evidence that showed that anything had been proven in the area. So,
and that's where I was at. I thought there's never been evidence to show that it causes, and that's where I think Anna was thinking, what if it one day? But as Nigel's pointed out, the laws of physics themselves show that we have magnitude upon magnitude of distance between whatever's even possible to cause that break or problem. So thank you for that research today, Nigel. Max, thank you for your input thus far.
Pleasure.
Don't go away. Do a couple of exercises or whatever, because you'll need some stimulation for Is It News.
Oh, yeah.
You up
I'm
for it?
looking forward to it. Come on.